So, hi everyone. Welcome to a little conversation we're going to have around co-production. And I've got a special guest with me today, Louise Patmore. I'm going to let Louise introduce herself, but just to say I'm the Lived Experience Co-ordinator for Changing Futures Sussex, and my name's Andree. Over to you, Louise.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Louise Patmore. I'm the Systems Change Lead for Changing Futures, and that's a role across Sussex where I'm looking at different ways that we work within organisations, between organisations and as individuals, and very much looking at how we can change things so that clients, patients, carers can have a more seamless journey, maybe through some of the services that are provided, and look for some of the gaps that we've got and try and close them.
Thanks, Louise. That's great. So Louise has very kindly said that she's going to answer some questions for me today, so we'll crack straight on. So Louise, how important do you feel that lived experience involvement and co-production is in systems change?
Yeah, thanks. I don't think you can do it without lived experience. I think it's absolutely crucial that we have that lived experience at the heart of the decision making. In the same way that if you're buying anything, the first thing that people are thinking about is what does the customer need? In this instance, with health provision, it's slightly different because you have to use services, you need services. But in order to really get to the best kind of service that can be provided, you really need to understand what is that lived experience of that process for people, and what is the wisdom that we can get from people who go through services, and why aren't we using it anyway naturally to understand how our services work?
Absolutely. Thank you. So could you give me one or two examples of where the system has worked effectively in a co-produced way to make changes, especially at that kind of strategic level?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think there's a thing to recognise. There is actually quite a lot of co-production that does happen, and there's an awful lot that doesn't. And there are lots of attempts at co-production that kind of just miss the target somewhat. So I think there are lots of times when service users, carers, clients come together and they think about maybe a new way of doing things. For me, the actual linkage between what service users are asking for in those forums and what is delivered can get quite disconnected. I mean, having sort of said that, there are some good examples of co-production and return lived experience value in things like such as partnership. We've got like the Lighthouse, for example. That's a thing that there's lots of co-produced decision making in that project, and the service users then sort of invited back to become peers for a while. When they're sort of on the way out. That's one example. I think in Changing Futures, we've got some work going around peer metrics and what that looks like, and the conversation is widening out to different people, and there are different viewpoints about that, and sometimes that can take a little longer to get through, but actually I think that's bringing some really interesting questions in, as well as the solution that we're asking for. Quite often in the system, another question will come up in co-production, something else will come up, and it needs to stir the imagination of the strategic thinkers. I mean, sort of in my experience, the Recovery College, which in my background, that was co-produced from start to finish, and we got some really effective results from that. Really proud of the work that happened there. I think that there's so many little examples of where small organisations do really valuable work, and they have co-produced projects. So my sister's house had a really good one with peer telephony system through COVID, for example. So they were having peer workers that were looking after people in domestic violence situations. I think that worked fantastically well. So yeah, there are a couple of examples of things working really well at organisational level. In terms of strategic, we do have a broad Lived Experience Advisory Group that's working in Brighton Hove. It's working in East Sussex, and it's building more momentum in West Sussex. We've got two service user led organisations. We've got Capital, we've got Recovery Partners in Sussex that have been inputting into certain elements of the system and have successfully brought in different changes. And a couple of years ago, the suicide prevention work stream was co-produced with Ruth Finley, and that produced some really interesting, innovative ideas while that was working in a co-produced way.
Excellent. So it sounds like there's lots of stuff going on already, which is great, and what we know. Can you give me an example of the kind of challenges that you face as a systems change lead trying to co-produce, and how you might have overcome those?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think the challenges are time, and I think that I think the fear of the unknown, and different parts of the organisation aren't used to sharing and being open and transparent. I think we're quite what we call an opaque system, where we can't quite see through it well enough to understand how it works. And then many people really desperately want to do co-production, and they want to have that lived experience, but there's a fear that stops people from moving into that territory of the unknown and the uncertain. And we've got lots of pressures in the system to perform and to deliver results against the clock, and quite often we can get tripped up by commissioning asks from that might come from national or from other sort of things, where there's money. All of a sudden we've got 1 week or 2 weeks to do something, and we can't galvanize that action. Overcoming that is to preempt it. Quite often we know those things are coming, so we know, for example, that winter's coming, and there's going to be a conversation in August, September about winter. Well, we ought to be having that conversation now, and having it with service users and carers clients now, not waiting until So I think it's being able to get the system to not wait for things, actually to expect things. It's way of thinking where you're preempting and you're not lagging behind. There's a thing called lagging metrics, where you look behind. Actually, we need to be looking forward, and we need to be doing that with our service users and carers. That includes building the lived experience groups. Mm-hmm. So I was part of the initial conversations of that happening with the community transformation, and getting that across the line in West Sussex, where we co-production coordinator, got those roles where people can come in and they can they can galvanize, they can bring people together. Yes. They can network, they can get into the places and make a case for why we would have co-production, because the system needs help. It's very compressed, and it's compressed in time. So just releasing that compression, I think, can be really helpful.
That's really good advice, I think, Louise. Thank you for that. And thank you very much for your time today. It's been really helpful. Hopefully we can meet again at some point and continue the conversation. Thanks a lot, Louise. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.